So, as many of you recall, last year I made a video about the 5 years that were way worse than 2020 because everybody was freaking out that 2020 was the end of the world. And we all had some fun with it, especially on Daddy Issues. We played that game. Is it 2020 or is it Revelation? That was fun. But regardless, 2020 really wasn't so bad. That's why I made the video. I hoped it would inspire people to see the positive and maybe not be so fearful. Well, joke's on me, huh? 2021 was way worse. Totally proves the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Not the only thing, but you get the gist. So, this video is kind of a follow-up to that. This video is the 5 reasons why 2021 was way worse than 2020. I'm glad that last year me is not aware of this video because I may have started the year defeated. Regardless, here are the 5 reasons why 2021 was way worse than 2020. Okay. Number 1, we started the year, January 6th, with a reminder that we can't seem to have a peaceful transition of power anymore. January 6th, insurrection, riot, whatever you want to call it. People get so caught up in semantics and then they wonder why the country's falling apart. Like, girl, you can't even agree on definitions and we're supposed to make this work. Okay, good. Now, I have friends that have been featured on this channel that will die on this hill. It's not an insurrection. It wasn't a good look. Our pictures from this are everywhere. We are the Kardashians of the world, okay? The whole world is watching us, judging, knowing full well we can't watch them and judge them because we don't speak the language and we really don't care. Anyway, it was a reminder that our election system is in trouble and we can't seem to run a country. We can't even have peaceful elections anymore. Now, fingers crossed for 2022, fingers crossed for 2024. I have full faith that we can get it together. If people on My 600-Pound Life can get it together and have amazing come-ups, so can the United States. And if there is any country that should be on My 600-Pound Life, it is the United States. But girl, let's have a come-up. Regardless, January 6th, we had a reminder, yet another reminder, that the United States can't seem to run an election. Now, we have been aware of this for a while now. It goes from election cycle to election cycle to election cycle to election cycle, and our politicians can't get anything done because they're worried about the next election cycle. Right now, we're worried about 2022, 2024. Why don't we focus on 2021? Why don't we focus on 2020 and getting stuff done? Regardless, the January 6th Capitol riot / insurrection / whatever you want to call it, in which a lady was shot dead, various other people, police officers died related to the incident, not directly from it, but related to it. The whole world was watching as the United States completely embarrassed itself. The Capitol was overrun. Now, a lot of you will say, okay, this was lingering tensions from the summer of 2020, from the riots we had in the streets in the summer of 2020. Fair point. This video is not about 2020. This video is about 2021, and it started off on a terrible note. January 6th, 2021. Number 2, inflation is up, so everything costs more. Now, that's great if you own a house. That's great if you own stock. But if you're young and you're earning in cash or you're earning wages, you're earning a paycheck, that's not very good. Because inflation is up by a lot. I get the Zillow reminders because it's like, oh, remember you had dreams of buying a house? Well, here's that house. What is the increase? It tells you what the increase cost is. It's up like 12% from last year. In a year, but they printed all this money, they printed all this cash, and then they bought back their stocks. So stocks are up by 12%. Oh, but you should have bought stocks. Really? You tell that to someone coming out of college that they should have bought stocks. They need to pay off their student loans. That's the dumbest thing. That's the dumbest argument I hear from people. You should have been buying stocks and going to college and having children and buying formula. We bought a pickup truck this year, just in case we need to escape this dystopian hellscape that is Los Angeles. And plus, my bae uses it for his work because he's actually working, earning in money, which is not good for us. Regardless, at the dealership, I won't name names, at the dealership, they tried to upcharge 50%. because someone would pay for it. They're like, well, if you don't want to get this, someone else will. Well, they don't have the inventory, so someone else will pay for this. Well, my base says they tried to upcharge 100%, not 50%, because it was, the sticker value was 32. They wanted 65. Now, fees, et cetera, I'll give you some fees. You want to throw on an air conditioning, or you want to throw on some filter nobody asked for? Okay, fine. I know you're going to skim a little bit off the top, but 100% increase? Of course, there were no pickup trucks. So it was very hard for us to fight that. We just didn't buy new. And this was the first year where we were doing well enough. We thought, okay, we can finally buy a new car between the two of us, because we never bought new before. But we can't. We got priced out of it. So we got a used pickup truck. It's almost just as good. At least it doesn't hurt the environment. You know, there's that. Regardless, for someone in my age bracket, this inflation is a real bummer, because when are we going to buy the house? We're going to bring kids into this? Well, we are, because whatever. Kids aren't supposed to have a great childhood. They are supposed to suffer a little bit. But other people, I genuinely get why other people would be like, I'm not bringing kids into this. We can't afford it right now. So inflation. Me, I do the shopping. So I'm most worried about the cost of food. The cost of food has gone up so much this year. I really worry for families with young children who are just getting by, because they are earning wages and not in stocks. So I really worry for them. As far as these plastics and so forth, as far as the consumer goods and all this other stuff, I'm not too worried about all of that. I understand that Americans consume way too much. We produce way too much plastic. I see all these young kids in my family have all these toys they don't need. So I'm honestly not worried that a parent can't get their kids still more toys for Christmas. What I am worried about is that people aren't going to be able to buy high quality foods, and that's going to affect the children's lives for years and years to come. This is unrelated, but this is a really funny story, so I'm just going to throw it in there. Our friends got married this year because they couldn't get married last year because of COVID. So they got married this year, and they had their rehearsal dinner on the coast on Malibu, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful, and their parents had paid so much money so everyone could have a rehearsal dinner. And what was our view? The cargo ships. The cargo ships just docked off the coast. And remember when they hit that oil line and then completely polluted the sea as well? 2021. 2021 has been a year that is not directly related to inflation, but still. It has to do with a lot of plastic crap that we have. And we don't need all this plastic crap, so let's be honest. Food, however, high quality food, we do need that. Moving on. Number 3, the third reason why 2021 was a terrible year compared to 2020. How many people just died this year? This summer, I feel it was one after the other. Nothing to do with COVID. Nothing to do with COVID. But random things that just kept happening. Random events. And that's why I kept recommending that book. Remember, I recommended it like 20 times, The Drunkard's Walk on Randomness. Now, I know this is very specific to me. In my circle, a lot of people died. Young men in the prime of their lives just dropped dead this year. Now, on the one hand, it is very specific to my circle. But on the other hand, it is kind of a trickle down from things that are going on in the world. We have fentanyl. We had the most ODs this year of people in the prime of their lives dying because of fentanyl. Overdosing because of this new drug, because we are living in a nation full of despair and everyone's miserable and they're trying to self-medicate and they die because this new drug, FDA approved by the way, this new drug killed them. So that was one. Another was, God, I don't even want to think about it. But we do have an issue in Los Angeles with people racing, street racers. I don't know if this is nationwide. I don't know if this is a result of people, this upcoming generation just being so selfish that they think that they have the right to speed through residential areas and whatever happens, I guess. You gotta go vroom, vroom. And what happens? People's children die. So that was absolutely tragic. That was awful. I know that's specific to my circles, but I feel it is a reflection of what is going on in the country in general because our mortality rate is much higher. To do with COVID, I don't know, because it's in my age group too. A lot of that is overdose, car accidents, mental illness, all of these things. It affected me this year. Number 4, Let's keep this upbeat, huh? Yeah, let's keep going. So we covered death. Number 4 is the vax versus anti-vax divide. Now, we're at the end of the year. Omicron is kind of making the vax, I wouldn't say obsolete, but it's coming for the good and the bad alike. Let's just say that. And who's the bad? The bad are the people who didn't get it. The bad are the people who didn't go along. Well, why didn't they go along? Well, it was fishy. It was completely fishy from day one. Now, you know where I stand on this. I'm not trying to tell anyone else what to do. I would never do that. I never have done that. So anyone who unfollowed me because of my particular stance, I felt that was unfair because I never tried to tell anyone else that it should be their stance. It just was my stance. And I'm also not going to hide it because I also feel that that is a disservice to the public. So I was open about it. I embrace everybody regardless of their status. It didn't bother me one bit. But I do have empathy for the vaccinated because this time last year, they said it would be the end of this. If you got vaccinated, you would not get COVID. The president said it. The president said it. The director of the CDC said it. It's a pandemic of the unvaccinated. They promised things to people. They promised them that if they took this experimental, let's be honest, it's super experimental. If they took this experimental treatment, that they wouldn't have COVID. Slowly, that turned out not to be true. Now, did they know it wasn't going to be true from jump? I don't know. I'm going to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Regardless, they overpromised on this, and they pressured people to getting it. Now, that on its own is bad enough. I have empathy. That on its own is bad enough. I really do feel for the people who feel that they've been duped now because they've got Omicron and they're boosted and triple jabbed or whatever. I feel for those people. But the biggest problem that happened this year is that this narrative came out that the unvaxxed are unclean, that they're vermin, that they're plague rats. Do you remember this genocidal rhetoric over social media this summer? Do you remember this? Because they were trying to pressure people to get it. And they were trying to pressure people to peer pressure their family members. Families were torn apart by this. I'm not going to go into it personally. However, families were torn apart by this. This was another Salem thing. The unclean, the other. They tried to other a third of the population. They tried to say that, oh, you don't have to feel for them because they're Trump supporters. I knew people who I considered a friend prior to this. I knew them wish death on another person because they were unvaccinated and they got COVID this summer. They wished death on them. And that made me think, what kind of a person? Now, obviously, we know from history that this type of conditioning, this type of social programming can happen. It happens every couple hundred years. It happens, honestly, more frequently than that, but it really comes to a boil every 100 years or so, where they other a segment of the population, and the next step is dangerous. Regardless, we caught a whiff of that this year, and it was disgusting. And I'm not going to say it didn't go both ways, because we did see that the unvaxxed crowd was wishing death on the vaxxed. Now, I feel that that was a reaction to what had happened before, to the vaxxed wishing death on them. But nevertheless, we saw through social media, through the media in general, but basically through social media, an attempt to divide the people, to pit them against each other. Now, if you were conspiratorial minded, you might think that this was a massive psyops campaign to see how far they could push the public. Thankfully, we did not go down the Australia road. We're better than that. I'm actually quite hopeful for this country because we did handle it pretty well. But nevertheless, are we gonna pretend that this didn't happen? I really wonder what next Christmas is gonna be like, especially for households where some got the vaccine and some didn't. What is that gonna be like? Oh, remember last year when you were wishing death on me? Remember last year when you wouldn't let me in the same room with your children because you thought you were better than somebody? And that's very interesting too. Now, I'm not going to carry this into the new year, but it is interesting to note all the people who, because they were told they were better than other people, believed it and actually took that out on their family. I mean, forgive, but don't forget. And I hope those people don't forget either. I hope those people realize what they did wrong and make amends some way or the other. Because what happened this year with the vaxxed, unvaxxed divide, that's something that we're going to remember for the rest of our lives. That's going to be a major warning red flag about how easily people can be manipulated and turned on each other. And that's something that you should remember for the rest of your life. What happened this summer? Never forget it. I'm keeping a journal. I usually keep a journal, but I'm especially keeping a journal this year because this year is going to be the year that kids want to read about. They're going to be like, what was grandma doing in 2021? What did she feel about 2021? Well, it's in the journal. Never forget. Never, never forget. And that doesn't mean that you disown your family, but you should probably bring it up like once a year. That's all. Just be like, oh, remember the time you tried to disown me because I didn't get this experimental shot that didn't work anyway? And the fifth reason why 2021 was way worse than 2020 is now we are going into the new year divided, hateful, and completely uncertain. There is no hope. At least at the end of 2020, people were like, well, there's a vaccine and the vaccine's going to work. Once we get it to everybody, it's going to be just fine. This is going to be over. We're going to come together and blah, 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 blah. That didn't happen. That didn't happen at all, did it? Regardless, we don't have that this year. What kind of hope do we have to grab onto? We have no leaders. Both of the party heads, both of the heads of both parties. I don't even know why we're pretending that we have different parties anymore. It's two sides to the same coin, whatever. We got Trump and Biden, both incompetent, there's no hope. There is hope. The hope is within us. The hope is that we can get it together, that we are learning, educating ourselves, staying fit, staying healthy, and keeping our sanity. That's our hope. Our hope is us. A lot of you just lost all hope because you know yourself. But for me, I'm somewhat hopeful. I've been encouraged by what I've seen going out and talking to people. I'm being encouraged by what I'm seeing on some areas of online. So I have not lost hope. But as a nation, we're in a much worse place than we were in 2020 as far as that goes. And like I said, the elections, it's election cycle to election cycle to election cycle to election cycle. And even that, I feel, is a crutch for the real hopelessness, because when you look at it, this election cycle is just putting us further and further into our corporate oligarchy. So if we were to ever look past the election cycle, what would we see? And sometimes it's better to have that crutch. I don't know. So yeah, our morale is down. Our life expectancy is falling. The kids are ODing. The kids now are a little dumb because of the masks and because they weren't in school. So I'm hoping this next generation is resilient. Children tend to be resilient. Young people tend to be resilient. Don't ever sell yourself short. You can probably do a lot more than you think you can do. However, to look on paper. So if this wasn't enough and you want to feel even worse about the future, go ahead and watch American Factory on Netflix. It's a great documentary as far as documentary goes. It's not very hopeful. However, like I said, stuff changes all the time. Things can improve and they can get worse. It's all a matter of how much work we are willing to put in. Oh, tweeting is not work. Yelling at somebody online, that's not work. Work requires you probably standing up and going out and doing something, even if it's just talking to a neighbor, especially a neighbor who doesn't share your political views. Things can go bad, but they can also get better. So we're coming to the end of 2021, and it's been one for the record books. Let's just say that. And we are going to look back on this time and be like, oh yeah, you remember that year the Illuminati tried to take over the world and it failed? Not Illuminati. I shouldn't say Illuminati. Remember that year our overlords tried to take over the world and institute some sort of weird policy and it failed? But remember they tried to do that though. Remember they tried. They really tried. Fingers crossed for 2022, guys. Remember that video, 5 ways to program yourself so you're not so susceptible to all this nonsense. I do believe we can get through it, but we got to be honest with ourselves. Things aren't looking good right now. But hey, the Illuminati didn't take over the world, so right? Good. It worked out. We're not Australia right now, so subscribe.